Spin it real fast around the room. Yeah, I gotta get the bathroom too. Mm-hmm. Little flowers.
What?
Got like folded towels with little flowers.
You getting any of it?
I don't know how it's gonna come out, being it's at night and everything. Okay, is there really someone standing in front of that building, or is it?
Than there was in most of the other settlements. In fact, in the first 99 years of settling here, they had built 98 churches in the city within the boundaries, which of course were much smaller than they are today. So for that reason, basically anywhere you stood within the city, you were very, very close to a church. And for that reason, Charlestown became known as the Holy City. You may have seen it referred to as the Holy City. Now this alleyway, Philadelphia alleyway, became known as the Unholy Alleyway. And the reason for that was this was the only place for a long time that you could have stood anywhere in the city and not been able to see the steeple of a church. And where you were unable to see the steeple of a church, it meant that God could not see you. You were out from under the eyes of God. So because of that, this particular alleyway was where many a gambling debt that had gotten a little out of hand would be resolved, personal fights and disagreements, they would come here, prostitution, dueling even. But there were, however, a lot of pretty brutal murders taking place along this alleyway. They have a lot of documentation, in fact. In Charleston, the Pinckney family, I'm sure you've come across the Pinckney family name at some point. There was a gentleman by the name of Andrew Pinckney who had made a lot of money as a sugar broker, basically running sugar boats back and forth from Barbados to the port here in Charleston. And Mr. Pinckney had actually subcontracted some work to another gentleman who was actually from Virginia, who was not a local. His name was Joshua Wilson. And Mr. Wilson was in charge, or had been assigned to, running 7 sugar boats from Barbados to the port here in Charleston. Now they had arranged all the details of this business deal, the schedules to be kept, the amount of money to be paid to Mr. Wilson upon arrival, all the details. And Mr. Wilson did in fact keep his side of this deal. He ran the boats on time, no problems. However, when he'd arrived here, there had been quite a big crash in the sugar market, and Mr. Pinckney, a fairly keen business mind, knew if he had paid the original sum of money to Mr. Wilson, he would have taken a pretty large financial loss. So he didn't. He offered to pay him just a quarter of the money he had arranged. So Mr. Wilson did take a very large financial loss on this deal. Now, obviously, he was not amused. He had to be escorted from the Pinckney mansion. And what he had done was, this night, after a fairly heated argument, he had left the Pinckney mansion and wandered throughout the city, stopping in and out of various taverns along the way. And what he was doing along the way was slandering the reputation, particularly the family reputation, but in particular the business reputation of Mr. Pinckney, which in these southern cities, as you may have heard, your reputation very much precedes you. Word got back to Mr. Pinckney, and he knew he had to put an end to this. What he had decided to do was he hired 3 thugs. The following night, they were to track down Mr. Wilson, drag him back here to Philadelphia, and basically just give him a bit of a beating, tell him out of town, go back to Virginia, whatever it may be, we've had enough of you. So they did that. They tracked him down, just in the tavern by where the waterfront park is, dragged him back here, and started to give him a bit of a beating. Now things got a bit out of hand. Mr. Wilson was able to reach to his boot, where like a lot of men at the time who carried a knife. He was then able, in self-defense, to attack one of his 3 attackers, caught him quite nastily in the neck. Now this apparently bought him a few moments. He tried to make a run for it to the top of the alleyway. They tracked him down and they brought him back down here to where we're standing now, and this time they brutally beat him a little harder. They did in fact stab Mr. Wilson pretty nastily. They left him here for dead, which he was dead, and left him lying here in Philadelphia. Now, this was a fairly big case here in Charleston, as it had to do with the large family, the Pinckney family. The 3 attackers were actually tried and were hung at the city jail for the murder of Mr. Wilson. But Mr. Pinckney, however, had all charges dropped against him. Some things in the South are very much the same today. But we think that Josh Wilson is just one of many. As I said, they have a lot of documented cases on people who were pretty brutally murdered along this alleyway. He's just one of many unrested souls that wander along here. Now it's become, over the years, a sort of rite of passage for young men in particular to come back here alone at night under the veil of darkness and walk from one end of the alleyway to the other. Now, people have been doing this for many, many years, as you can imagine. Now, one thing that is quite unusual that we hear all the time, and apparently has been going on for quite a long time, this music is just quite funny in the background. Now, one thing that we've heard a lot is quite a lot of people have complained that they've walked the alleyway and everything was fine. But when they left the alleyway and were walking home or going wherever they were going, they have noticed that their forearms were all scratched up. Not obviously like a knife, but as if they'd gone through some pretty nasty bushes or thickets or some sort, which there isn't anything along here. Actually, about not even, I'd say 3.5 weeks ago, I was back here telling this story. As we were walking off, there was a young lady on tour who came up to me and said, "Would you look at this?" Her forearms had just broken out in this really nasty it looked like poison ivy to me, just all red and bumpy and sort of, just this nasty rash, which, I mean, there's nothing you can see. We're standing here, you're not going to get poison ivy from this tree, it's just not happening. And about 20 minutes later on in the tour, she pointed out to me again, she was like, "Look, it was completely gone." So we don't know what the significance of the forearm thing is, but it's a very, we hear things like this very, very often. Now, a lot of people do come back here after tours, to a lot of the locations that we saw that people come back when it's later on, there's less people, it's darker, they do cut out some of these lights.
And the music.
Particularly they come here, and the music. They come back here with camcorders and regular cameras as well. Now, we are constantly getting people contacting us, as are all the other tour companies. They've come back here after tour with a camcorder that was working just fine all day throughout the city, out at Fort Sumter. The camcorder just does not work here in Philadelphia. They leave Philadelphia, the camcorder works fine. We hear that all the time, so it's,
It was weird when you said that. Mine got all blurry. I'm serious. Look, I can't see anything on mine. It's just blurred out. Look,
Get out of town.
Look at it. There's her image, and it's all blurry. And I had her in perfect focus. Look at this. I had her in perfect focus. Oh, there she came back. That was weird. Because I had her in perfect focus through the whole thing, and then when
I've actually seen here on this alleyway, I was back here. It was just after last Christmas, actually, a couple of weeks after last Christmas. It was a reasonably warm night just after Christmas. There was an elderly lady on the tour.
So it shouldn't have had a focus problem, There
was only about sort of 4 or 5 people. And this elderly lady was wearing a pair of shorts, these sort of long knee-length shorts. And I noticed while I was talking to her, she kept sort of rubbing her knee, and it caught my eye that her leg was bleeding, her knee was bleeding, she'd cut herself or something. And I pointed it out to her and said, "Why don't you just go to the top of the alleyway, cross over to Cumberland's," which at the time was not playing this type of music, and get a Kleenex. I would finish the tour, and we'd pick her up there and move on. Now, when I finished up, when I got to the top with the group, the remaining 4 people, this lady who was waiting for us, I actually did feel quite sorry for her. She was in a real state. Her leg had just completely stopped bleeding when she'd left Philadelphia and crossed the street. But there was absolutely nothing on her. There was no cut, there was no scratch, there was no bite. There was literally nothing on her leg, nothing at all that would have caused it to bleed. So she, needless to say, said she got her $10 worth. She went back to her hotel. And she was alone, like she was pretty disturbed. And it did throw all of
No idea.
That is the one over there.
Charleston, what is referred to, or what is called, the Gray Man. Have you heard of the Gray Man?
No.
You have? Good. Well, the Gray Man is who is actually based on a gentleman who lived here in Charleston, who's a very wealthy man by the name of John Smythe. However, he was the typical bitter, sort of nasty, reclusive mean, spirited man that nobody liked in Charleston. He had nothing to do with society life. He just kept it to himself, but sort of scowled at people and just was not a pleasant man. He eventually died. He is buried in the back of this cemetery, all the way in the back on the left-hand side. And he is known now, as he returns to Charleston, as the Grey Man. Now, the Grey Man, who locals swear by, or a sighting of the Grey Man, is most definitely a sign of a storm on its way.
Oh, great.
People sight the Grey Man. They see him in the distance. This man who appears to be wearing a sort of long grey suit turns around and looks at you. He has no face.
In the cemetery?
And that is around the cemetery and also out. For some reason, people swear to sight the Grey Man all the time out at Folly Beach. Travels. But yes, there's a lot of sightings out at Folly Beach. In fact, just before Hurricane Hugo, there was a lady that kept swearing that she sighted the Grey Man out at Folly Beach. No one believed her, of course. However, Hurricane Hugo did in fact hit, and after it had hit, her house was the only one left standing on the street. So
Wow. That's
crazy
cool.
talk. Perhaps more people will pay attention. Now, back in the early 1800s, this particular cemetery here was called Ghost in the Graveyard. Any of you guys used to play it? Still do play it? Still do. Can you play it? I never played it. You never played it?
I played it in the dark. It's like hide and seek in the dark.
Oh, okay.
Wish
Well-
it was nice and safe.
Exactly. Well, this game was apparently very, very, very popular. This particular cemetery, probably because it was very central in the city, easy access, they could hop over the wall and run around and play this game. However, St. Philip's here behind us, after a while they got a bit fed up with people running around in this cemetery at night. Basically, they were damaging a lot of the gravestones. They were tearing up the grounds, and they just got sick of it. So what they decided to do, they were trying to think of a way to stop so many people, young people coming in here at night. They thought of, what they could do. They took this story of the Grey Man and they decided to embellish it a little bit. They spread this story throughout the city that anyone in this cemetery after dark, John Smythe, or the Grey Man, would leave his gravestone. He would travel along underground, come up, grab them by the leg, drag them underground, and they would never be seen again. Now, you guys you don't look particularly disturbed. You're like, did that work? It did, actually. It was pretty successful. This story, it was spread as well. People, and as it was spread, it was embellished. They added little
They're not
bits
still
here and
burying
there.
here, are they?
Sorry?
They're not still burying people here, are they?
Not very often. You have to be someone pretty special in Charleston to be buried and passed on and embellished as well along the way. And it was pretty well known. People stopped running around. They stopped coming in here at night. Now, there was a family living here in Charleston in this is actually 1843, a family by the name of the Witherall family. They in fact lived just on the corner here of Church and Queen, this building which now belongs to the church. Do you see it just on the corner there? Now, the Witheralls had an only child. They had a daughter by the name of Sally Witherall. Now, it was the evening of Sally Witherall, the debutante ball. It was the evening inside the house, quite late that night. They were probably just getting away from the parents for a short while, having a glass of wine or gossip, whatever they were doing. While they were standing out there, a horse-drawn carriage had been coming up Church Street. Now, when it got to the gates of this cemetery, the horse just freaked. It stopped. It refused to pass the gates of the cemetery, reared back, just would not go any farther. Now, they had to turn this carriage around and go back down Church Street. Now, Sally's friends standing outside saw this. They, of course, thought the Grey Man must be lurking around somewhere over here. We better get back inside. Well, being that it was Sally's debutante ball, she wasn't going to have any of the attention taken away from her. She started to tell her friends not to be so stupid. Who believes in the Grey Man? This is just a story that the church fabricated. I'm not afraid of ghosts, and so forth. Well, her friends, they decided they'd call her bluff, have a bit of fun for 15, 20 minutes. They dared Sally, since she wasn't afraid, come into the cemetery, head to the back, touch the gravestone of John Smythe, and come back out. Just to make sure that Sally didn't just head in and hide behind the walls for a few minutes and come back out, what they did was they gave her her father's walking stick. They'd gone back in, got her father's walking stick, and told her she was to go in, go to the back to the gravestone, take the walking stick, drive it into the ground at his grave, and come back out. And not that night, but the following morning, her friends would go in, they would retrieve the stick for her father, and see that Sally had, in fact, kept her side of the stair. So she set off. She headed across the street and into the cemetery. Now, keeping in mind in 1843, there was no hideous parking garages here with lights shining around. There was no street lights, no traffic. This was a very dark and a very quiet street. And this was, of course, an even darker and an even more quiet cemetery. Also keeping in mind, Sally, this particular evening, was not in jeans and tennis shoes. If she ever was.
Ball gown and white gloves.
Exactly. She was to the nines. She was in her debutante ball gown, which the traditional debutante ball gown came complete with a hoop that went all the way around, a train of material in the back. On the whole, a lot more cumbersome than what we're used to today. So Sally headed in, and as she wandered farther into this cemetery, it did, of course, become very dark. She was completely alone. She did, of course, become pretty frightened. Sally decided to pick up her pace a little bit, get in there, drive that stick in and get out. She decided to make a run for it. Sally grabbed her dress. She had her father's walking stick in the other hand. She ran back to that grave. She took the stick. She drove it into the ground. And that was, in fact, the last time that Sally Witherall was known to be alive. Now, her friends waiting across the street, this was just a joke, 15, 20 minutes. She wasn't back. They panicked. Now, they went in and got Mr. Witherall, her father. Now, he was, of course, furious. He was not, however, thinking the Grey Man. He was thinking more along the lines of drunken sailors. Places like this made a great place for them to have a few pints that night, nowhere else to go, they would sleep here, as in most of the cemeteries. He got a few people together. They headed into the cemetery. And as they got to the back where John Smythe is in fact buried, they did find the body of his daughter, Sally, and she was dead. Sally Witherall, as I'd said, unable to refuse this dare, really, headed across the street and into the cemetery. As I said, it was probably pitch dark. I mean, it's fairly dark tonight. You can imagine in the 1840s it was very, very dark. She was completely alone. She did, of course, become pretty frightened, I would imagine. She decided to make a run for it. She grabbed her gown in one hand. She had the stick in the other. She ran back to that grave. She took the stick. She drove it into the ground. She turned to run. She couldn't. She was stuck. In her panic, Sally had taken that walking stick, drove it into the ground, straight through the hoop in her debutante ball gown. As she turned to run to get out, and she couldn't move. She was stuck. As she, of course, was thinking the Grey Man had her by the legs, dragging her under the ground. Sally Witherall died of a heart attack. Oh my God. On the records of death, which they still have here at St. Philip's, that lists cardiac arrest as the reason for death of young Sally Witherall. Now, quite ironically, she herself is buried in this cemetery as well. She's on the other side, she's on this side from the Grey Man or John Smythe all the way in the back. If you guys are wandering around in the daytime, so you can get into any of these cemeteries and graveyards in the daytime if you want to go to the gravestone. She is all the way in the back on this side. Now, at 18 years of age, Sally Witherall basically frightened herself to death. Now, Sally Witherall is, in fact, believed to be possibly the most frequently sighted ghost in Charleston outside of the residential homes. There's quite a few of the homes that the families are in constant communication with the ghost. But she is the most commonly seen outside of the residential homes. Now, the reason that they're fairly sure that she's the most frequently sighted is that she is always described almost exactly the same way. Now, a lot of the hotels in this area have been having guests returning several times a year. They'll get one or two people return. And this has been going on long before any of these companies started up. But these guests, quite often returning from the Dock Street Theatre, which is just farther up this road, passing by here quite late at night, see this young lady. She's always described as a bridesmaid or a young lady who's been at a party. We think because they must just see the gown, the formal gown. They report this young bridesmaid, who they think has probably had one too many that night, gotten herself locked in the cemetery. However, she's always described with having this red flower behind her ear. Now, they report this to the reception. They think she's very much real, that they should probably call the police or whomever else is in charge of the cemetery to come and get her out. Now, of course, when the police come down, the gates are locked as always, and there's no one in here. But she is always described with having this red flower behind her ear, which you really don't see too many young women wandering out with flowers behind their ears anymore. So that's why they're fairly sure that Sally, or the debutante, is most often seen. So if you're wandering past late at night, or you decide to hop over and have a wander in, Sally is very frequently seen. So look out for the debutante. Here. Some of you may have noticed, in fact, as you're walking up, this steeple here leans slightly to the left. This particular church was finished just before the Civil War, and of course this steeple here made a great target for passing cannonballs. In fact, it was hit so frequently that at one point this steeple leaned 21 degrees to the left. They've obviously since repaired it, but it still leans, I believe, 4 degrees to the left. In fact, a lot of people here in Charleston refer to it as the liberal church for that reason, but it does slightly lean. Now,
That's not straight. Okay.
now, have you guys been to Charleston before?
No.
No.
I have one.
Charleston, you have one, yeah. Charleston at the moment is doing very well. The city's, well, it was. I don't know if it is actually the last few weeks, but it's been booming for quite a few years. Tourism is doing fantastically well, property and so forth. Now, one of the biggest influences on this sudden boom in Charleston was, of course, Hurricane Hugo, which hit. It destroyed a lot of the city, and a lot of money was put into the city after that. But there was another quite interesting influence on tourism here in Charleston. Have you guys read or heard of the book by the name of Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's Savannah.
Yeah, that's it. It was pretty good. Now, this, as you know, was a huge success. The book went to the top of many lists, and they made movies and so forth. What that actually did was, for the first time ever, really, it attracted a lot of attention from people in the northern states. They suddenly became interested in these southern cities, this sort of southern lifestyle, the southern culture, and they started driving down to places like New Orleans and Savannah in particular, to come and have a look, see what's going on. Now, our Mayor Riley, at one point was trying to think of a way that he could stop some of these people driving down to places like Savannah and New Orleans and get them to stop here in Charleston. Charleston's, well, it's much more interesting than Savannah, pretty and so forth. Now, what he did was he contacted CNN Travel, and he had requested that they sent someone down to the city to have a wander around, basically a photojournalist to come around, take some pictures, and write an article on Charleston to get the name out there, get it circulating so that people would be more prone to stop. They did. They sent a gentleman down from Michigan who was going to write an article that was going to be titled Charleston, the Holy City. Now, this gentleman from Michigan was wandering around Charleston early one morning of June the 10th. He came across St. Philip's here. Thought to himself, great, I'll take a few pictures here. Appropriately, it's a church to go with this article I'm writing. It's very pretty. It represents a lot of what the South is about. It's got the wrought iron gates here at the front. It has the pineapples actually on either side. The pineapple is a symbol of Southern hospitality. That actually originated when husbands were away at sea. They would quite often bring pineapples back to their wives, as they were considered like a great delicacy here. Yeah, they were very exotic, that you couldn't get them anywhere in North America. Now they would come back, and when they returned, their wives would request that the husbands went and put 2 pineapples on either sides of the gate so that the neighbors would know that the husbands had returned safely and to come over and visit and share some of these pineapples. You may also hear in the South, the real reason was that the wives would request that the husbands came and put 2 pineapples on either sides of the gates so that their boyfriends would know that the husbands had returned. That's the Southern reason that they did it. Anyway, he took a few pictures here, wandered into the graveyard, took a few more pictures. Now, while he was wandering around in this graveyard, there was a certain group of graves in the back that caught his attention. Now, they are known now as the Howard family burial plot. And the reason they are called the Howard family burial plot is that 5 sisters or 5 daughters of the Howard family all died. They all died within 7 years of one another, one after the other, from various different causes. Now, this gentleman from Michigan just noticed this, thought how tragic, what a horrible loss to the family, took a few pictures and went back to Michigan. Now, while he was back in Michigan, he'd had his film, which he'd sent off to Kodak to be developed, returned to him. It was just before this article was about to come out. Now, there was one photograph amongst them that he did not recognize. He remembers when he was here very early in the morning, he was alone, he knew what he took pictures of, and this one photograph he did not recognize. He wrote a letter to Kodak. Dear Sir, Madam, I'm afraid I don't recognize this picture. Perhaps it belongs to someone else. Please rectify the problem, get it back to its original owner, but I need all my originals. Please sort that out. But when Kodak replied, what they basically said was, well, yes, you did. This was on your film roll, and it has already caught our attention. Kodak actually have in Rochester, New York. You guys are from New York, so you might even. Okay, you are. There's a center there that is associated with Kodak, and all that they do there is they examine photographs. They get thousands of Loch Ness monsters and the Yeti and Bigfoot and whatever else there is. And what they do is they examine these pictures and they expose them or they show how they've been tampered with. They show in technical terms how they've been double exposed or whatever else may have gone on, and they send them back as fraudulent. Now this photograph, which I have a copy of here, they were unable, they have examined this picture over and over and over again.
Is this the original or no?
No, this is a copy. The original was bought by CNN. CNN actually fund a lot of research into the paranormal, but CNN bought the original. Now this picture has been on TNT, the Discovery Channel. It's been on Unsolved Mysteries. It's called The Ghost of Charleston. You may have seen it before. Now I'm going to quickly show you guys. This picture is one of 10 photographs in the world that they cannot actually disprove. They have examined it in every possible way, and they cannot find any reason why my flashlight is not
Where was this taken?
Okay.
Back there by those
What we're
graves.
looking at is this image just here. Okay. This guy took a photograph of this gravestone. You see the gravestone? Yeah. Now, obviously, this image here was not there. I'll come around so you guys can see. Do you see? It looks like a woman.
Right.
Kneeling down. You're looking at her from the back because he took the picture from this angle. She's kneeling down. She's sort of bent over in front of this gravestone. Do you see it?
Yep.
Is it better if I take the light away for your camera?
I don't know. You can try. No, I don't think.
Not at all.
No.
Okay. Okay. Now what we're looking at? Do you see this image just here? What happened is this guy had taken a photograph of this gravestone just here. And he was there alone. He was there early in the morning. For your camera?
I don't know. You can try. No, I don't think.
Not at all.
No.
Okay. Okay. Now what we're looking at? Do you see this image just here? What happened is this guy had taken a photograph of this gravestone just here. And he was there alone. He was there early in the morning. There was nothing there. There was no one there. When the film was developed, this image here, which looks very much like a woman, just sort of kneeling down in front of the grave. You see that? You're looking at her from the back. She's sort of bent over. Yeah. That's her head. That's the outline now. Yeah, it looks like she's yeah. I know her well. Evidence of trickery. They know it's not a real person, but they can't find light. The use of lighting as trickery and so forth. Now, one group that came, of course, one of the daughters or one of the sisters by the name of Sue Howard, or Susan Howard, rather. She lived here in Charleston. She married a local Charlestonian. In fact, they lived just up Church Street here. But
John Smythe. Drayton Hall. Okay, I'm gonna swing around to the hall.
There's the moat.
Look at that.
That tree, huge.
Spanish moss. Oh, it's huge, all right. Back up, back in. Boy, I'll make everybody sick when they watch this. We'll be sick as dogs watching this tape. Spin around, spin around. What's the year of this house? Okay, when we watch this video, there'll be someone standing in the window.
Get some Spanish moss. Get some moss action going on.
Look at the grounds, how expansive. Could you imagine owning all this?
And a lot of people, when they walk in here, look at cast plaster. And we believe that's a tobacco leaf in the center. Those are camellia flowers around the edge. Really, the tobacco leaf is a symbol of American agriculture and economy at that time, although it wasn't grown right here on the property. But do you all, when you look up there, see that there are cracks, there are pieces missing? Those cracks run along 27-foot floor joists. And when we go upstairs today, we're going to be crossing a Kevlar bridge. And it's up there because the trust, in addition to doing the window conservation, is trying to stabilize the ceiling so we don't lose it. They had to remove the floorboards out of the room above it, so we'll see that later on. But all of these panels throughout the home made out of bald cypress, a local wood. And this wood is ideal because it expands and contracts with the weather, the humidity. It's also bug resistant. And these trees are huge. They grow up out of the swamps. And these panels are all, that's how you're looking at this very, very decorative, very, very English over mantle and mantle. And that is a copy. It was found in a book entitled Designs of Indigo Drawing Room or With Drawing Room. This is original to the construction of the home. This is from 1738, and it's one of the oldest of its kind left in the U.S. Hand-carved plaster. So the artisans, probably the slave workforce, apprentices, up on scaffolding, carving this design directly into the wet plaster. And so by looking at those window seats, you can too see how thick those exterior walls are.
Oh, yeah.
Looking at them. And here you see all the different moldings, and above the windows, those are all, each of those flowers individually hand carved.
Oh my goodness.
And did you all notice this right over here?
Yeah.
Have any idea why that's there?
Was a doorway?
It never was a doorway. In that Georgian Palladium, every window within Drayton Hall
Egg and dart molding.
is adorned
Symbolic
with
of life and death.
interior shutters. And originally, a key locked into the sash of what was once, as I mentioned, the 12/12 or 19/19.
Right.
With the new design, the 6/6, the key doesn't fit in there. But there's a wooden bar that's been added to pull down to secure these shutters into place. These we still use today during hurricanes. That's what I was here for, but also heat control, light control, privacy.
Right.
But they're not on all the windows, or they are?
They are, except in the raised English basement, which was another working area. There, their wooden shutters are on the outside. This area. The ceiling in here is 27 feet high, not off it. You've also got more of that West Indian mahogany. Most of the banister, the spindles, the brackets, made out of this imported wood. Some of it was stolen or taken out of here during the years of the Civil War. So in places, there is pine staying to look like dancing, the music, etc. But the ceiling kind of takes away, I think, from that today.
Yeah.
It's a beaded board pine ceiling put up after the Civil War. The original ceiling most likely was plaster. But you see the Corinthian pilasters, these fake columns, really signifying to us how formal this room. Those are between 250 and 300 years old, those trees.
Wow.
There is a great oak. They're oak. And those, the wood there, yeah, exactly. And that, there were many more of those, but unfortunately 1989's Hurricane Hugo took away over 70% of the trees on the property.
How does that moss grow on there?
It doesn't grow.
This is the front of Drayton. What's it called? Drayton Hall?
Drayton Hall.
Front of the house. Which we thought the other side was the front. It wasn't. This is Magnolia Plantation. See if we can get them ponies in for Caleb. He could be a cowboy. I'm a cowboy, Grammy. Look at them baby ponies. As you can see, it's pouring down rain here. We got duckies, and ponies, and duckies. This is a porch.
Can we take pictures in here? So you folks enjoying your visit?
Yes.
I'd like to welcome you to Magnolia, and you can stand on these rugs. I promise it's okay. This is the third plantation house to stand here at Magnolia. The first house burned in 1810 of natural causes. The second was burned by Sherman's troops in 1865. And so did you just get off the nature train? Now the bed is an 1840 mahogany taster bed. It's been used in a couple of movies that were filmed here in Charleston. The chest over the far corner to your right is like Victorian cherry wood. The two photographs on the chest are the present owner's mother and father, of course they're both deceased. If you look in front of the chest there, you'll see the rocking chair there to your left was the Reverend's, and it's mid-1800, made of walnut. If you look on the stand there, up into the book of Genesis, it's one of his pulpit Bibles. 5 of those make the set, printed in London in 1790, the King James Version, and 5 volumes only cover the Old Testament. If you look up at the table in the corner to your right, you will see the other 4. The secretary is 1815, mahogany, and on the secretary there's St. Set used at the seminary, a book of sermons he wrote 1838. This is a cup, and over here in the corner, the gun is $1,800 barrel musket, and the hunting horn that belonged to his older brother Thomas. Indian arrowheads and pottery. Folks saw the largest mounds and barrel grounds on the East Coast on his wedding day. Beside him, his bride, Julia Ewing from Philadelphia. These were their 1839 wedding portraits. In the middle here are 2 Drayton brothers who faced each other in battle at Hilton Head, South Carolina during the Civil War, but both survived. And to their right, Colonel William Drayton, their father. He served as Secretary of the Army under President Andrew Jackson. Below him, William Henry Drayton was a member of the Continental Congress. Then at the very bottom is his son John, who was twice our governor. The row in the middle here, this is Michael. He was poet laureate of the family, and he lies in Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey. The very bottom is the ancestral home in England, in Northamptonshire. That has been the home of the Drayton family since 1066. All of the furniture in the dining room is made of mahogany. This table here by the window, this is the only piece of furniture to survive the burning of the second house by the Union troops. And this was rescued by one of the servants from the rubble. This tall colonial cabinet here, they brought from their home in downtown. So, what was your question?
So
There's one generation missing in
the
that.
present owner inherited from the grandmother rather than the father.
But yeah.
So the father was deceased. Was that?
No. See, up until the time the Reverend Drayton married, you added Drayton to your surname. I don't care if it was Smith, it would have been John Smith Drayton.
Right.
And so the present owner and his brother, Norwood and Drayton Hasty, inherited it from the grandmother Julia. But there was a generation that was skipped, and
Cute.
many children does the Brittany family have?
2. And they have grandchildren. Little quilt on this bed, that's a depression quilt.